Welcome to this Fictionary author interview. Today I'm joined by Nikki Davenport. Nikki Davenport is the author of the Destination Lytua series and has a passion for crafting stories about falling in love. Her educational background includes a BA in history and a master's in social work. Outside of writing, Nikki keeps active by paddling with a dragon boat racing team composed of fellow breast cancer survivors and working in the field of education. Living in Northern Virginia, she shares her home with her husband, two teens full of snark, and a duo of spoiled feline overlords. An active member of a fabulous book club, Nikki is an avid listener of audiobooks and podcasts. Deeply passionate about portraying Black love in a positive light, Nikki delights in crafting her stories. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
You're so welcome. So let's kick off then, because I read your book and it's fantastic, by the way. And I say that as someone that doesn't normally read romance, but I was hooked in straight away. It was great. So where did you find or draw your inspiration for the characters in your novel?
From all around. I live in a very interesting part of the country. It's very cosmopolitan here. You can walk down the street and see folks from all around, and I love it. I'm someone who loves to sit by myself in like a coffee shop and just sort of soak it in, see what the ambience is like. Is that couple having an argument? What's going on over there? Not necessarily nosy, more observant, I would say. And some of it is drawn from things that have happened in my own life. A lot of things happen in my own family. This is the reason why I write teens so well, is because I have snarky teens. I love them dearly and they drive me crazy. But really, everything is fair game. And truth is far stranger than fiction. I can't make up some of the stuff that you hear happening.
Yeah, definitely, especially those overheard coffee shop conversations, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're the best. Okay, so moving on from that, what sparked the idea of setting your novel in the fictional world of Lytua? Or
Honestly,
rather, about, I mean, it's not set in Lytua, but what was the inspiration behind
it's
it?
well, this it will get to my two,
Right.
but it's set in Washington, D.C. And what I wanted to do was present a world that's sort of like a mashup of Bridgerton and Wakanda,
Mm,
where the excellence is the normal thing, that everyone is expected to have taken advantage of the education and sort of a not a I guess a utopian where we've got education that's highly valued. We have a matrilineal society. So what I'm thinking is sort of all of the things that I would want to have. And I didn't want to have the baggage that can come with being a person of color in the States, where that ends up being a struggle, sort of a soundtrack in the background that, oh, this is great, they're falling in love, but what about institutional racism? So I said no way to that. I wanted to have the sort of the fairy tale, and who doesn't want to have a fairy tale where this is possible and make it as real as possible, and that it represents sort of the best possible world for Black excellence, and that it's just the norm instead of, yeah, it's great except for, or they're great for being Black. That I did not want to have that be the field that was there. So I said, okay, well, sort of realistically, where would there be uh, an island kingdom that was never colonized? That was part of the my concern as well. Wanted to make sure that it was founded by. I made up a whole legend behind it. With it was established by enslaved people who had escaped, people who were always free, and other folks from the Caribbean. So that we didn't have that heavy history as part of the underlying foundation for everything, the same way we do here in the States. And it was important to me to juxtapose that with someone who is American, who has experienced foster care uh, and rose above that. So it's not that Riddick has had a perfect life here in America. And in fact, that's part of what the conflict is. He's had a very different background from hers. So I had a beta reader who, after reading it, she said, I just found out Lytua is not real. I looked it up, I Googled, I wanted to go there.
Oh,
And I said, you and me both, sister, because this
yeah.
place sounds fabulous.
Yeah, that's so true. And you did such a great job with that. And what I also found interesting was that Kara was an elected queen. You didn't have any
Yes,
kind of queen by birthright type thing, which was amazing.
exactly. Yes. So again, also part of my, what am I passionate about? What am I sort of thinking that a hereditary monarchy was, is, it's like you win the lottery by virtue of who you're born to, you have no control of that. But if you run a campaign and you have to get people to believe in you, that's very different. And using that as a pinch point, like on the first date that almost goes wrong immediately because of preconceived notions. Um, and that had been a really hard problem to solve, actually, with how can I make this so that it doesn't make him look silly for not knowing, but make it sort of believable. And I honestly, I just wrote around it. I used Fictionary in all of my pacing and everything else. Wonderful program. And I just came back to it. I waited for inspiration to strike because I couldn't force it. So, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
there's Lytua. I want to go.
I want to go too. I think everyone wants to go after reading your book. It's amazing. And I will say the whole elected queen thing that caused a lot of conflict in the book, not just between Kara and Riddick, but also kind of the wider political implications of her being such a young elected queen.
Yes.
Had some, you put some great conflict in there that you
Mhm.
don't often see in romance, and I was quite surprised in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I believe that strong friendships really do enrich your, and sometimes the love story is not just between the main couple. You have other people that love these people
Mhm.
and they're rooting for them. And if your best friend can't call you out on not being authentic, then what are they doing? Are they really your good friend or are they just a yes person?
Mm.
So, with the conflict of having Kara, and she's had a long political career that she
Mhm.
knew she wanted to go into government since she was young, and she fought for it. And that sort of, instead of her being thrust into that, she made a choice. It went a little bit beyond what she had originally anticipated. But growing into that role and being smart enough to keep people that were smarter and more experienced than she is on payroll to help keep her honest and accountable to the people. It's like I wish that's what all politicians, elected politicians, do. Is sort of to keep it real and remember. In the South, they would say you dance with the one who brung you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. So when did you first come up with the concept of Destination Lytua as a series, and how has it changed over time?
So I was cleaning out my uh, what's this file cabinet yesterday because I had started a new one for all of my writing, so I could get things organized. It's sort of mushrooming out of control. And I ran across a folded sheet of paper from November of 2003. Now, this is the year I got married. So I got married a couple of months before that.
Yeah.
And I had written the name Riddick was in there, and it was slightly different. It was more of a speculative fiction. And then I put it on shelf for a little while. I was like, I read it yesterday. I was like, I might have to return to this idea. It's okay. It wasn't meant for this particular series. But again, with me thinking how valuable friendships are that fulfill and encourage and uplift you, that those people all have stories as well. And so over time, it changed from just being a sort of standalone. This is actually the last book in the series chronologically.
Mhm.
But the stories that take place before, since they're all in Lytua, you would not get the same depth of world building without info dumping because Riddick is American, so he's going to have questions, going to need to have things explained. But we wouldn't have two people who are from the same place talking about it the same way someone who'd never heard of it. Uh, So I was hoping to sprinkle enough about the other folks that are characters in the other books leading up to it that people would want to read them. And that's been the feedback I've gotten. People love my villain and are mad that I didn't have her more. It's like, but it's not about her.
Yeah.
But that's good advice, actually. When I first started and having my first developmental edit, which felt like giving my baby away, but I was just like, I don't know how this is going to go, but here we go.
Yeah.
And she said that she thought the villain needed to be fleshed out. So I took that advice back, and then everybody else was like, well, I thought the villain was the best part. It's like, wait, that's okay, that's good. It is good. I was like, this wasn't what I was going for, but
Yeah.
every villain being the hero of their own story, that's where I took that. I was like, everybody has their own motivations, and it's not always so cut and dried with good and evil. There's a whole lot of gray. And when we get into True's motivation for things, uh, I was even starting to feel for her.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, I can see where that would drive anyone to maybe not to, kidnap or murder somebody, but cause enough conflict that you feel like, you got to do something. Do something about this, even if you have to wait a lot to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think she was a very sympathetic villain, and that's hard to do. And like you said, you're reading it and you think, oh, I can almost see why somebody would be driven to do this.
Like, well, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we want. But yeah, it was well handled. So where do you typically write? And did this or any other environment inspire elements of Lytua?
So for my day job, I do a lot of driving, and I have a very light laptop. It's a 2.2 pound laptop that when I say it goes everywhere with me, I mean everywhere. So I found on Amazon a lap desk that you put over your steering wheel, and it makes a desk. And if I've got 15 minutes before my next meeting starts, I jump on and I start writing. I said, when I went in to buy the thing, and my husband is the techie, I hand whatever it is to him and ask him to fix it. So I was going to take responsibility for my own learning. And when I went into the computer store, I said, I need something fast and light. So from cold startup to 10 seconds, I'm writing. So, okay, so the idea is still there before I lose it because I'm at the stoplight or something like that. Well, if I'm at the stoplight, I would put it in my notes.
Yeah.
Google Notes. I do the talk to type.
Okay.
The only thing about that is that it does some very strange things that it thought you said. And when maybe I did it an hour and a half ago, when I finally go to look at it and it makes no sense, I have to read it out loud like several times with several different intonations to try and figure out what the heck did I say. But most of the time I get it. And then at home, I have a very small office. I'm in a 2 small condo with 2 kids, husband, 2 cats, and half of my sanity sort of left behind here.
Yeah.
And this is the one place in the house that's really great. And it's a quaint little space because like I said, it's a tiny little condo outside of Washington, D.C. We're doing the best we can with space. And this is where I've been since COVID. Well, when COVID first started, I was writing on I had an elderly cat at the time, and she had stairs to get onto the bed. And because I didn't have a desk and I was taking this work meeting, I would sit the computer on the top step of the elderly cat step. She would sit on the second one and look at me accusingly. And that's what I would do until I could get the IKEA desk. So I just sort of made do, and I didn't want that to be an excuse for not doing it. I said, there's a library, there's any place, you've got the lap desk for your car. The challenge that I have is that I need quiet to create. And when you have two teenagers in the house, even when they're not talking to you, it's just constant noise, their energy, and I love them to death. But I know that I can't create when I can't even edit anything. Well, I've got to do other creative work when they are home. So it was setting up my schedule so that I could have the space to write. And I actually do it in the morning, right after the second one gets onto the school bus. That's when I have my creative time. And I try to keep it nice and even here because that allows my mind to stay focused instead of looking at, oh my goodness, I wish I changed this curtain. The clutter is out of control. All of those things that can drag you out of the creative space. So I use a timer. I use a 20-20-20 timer. I learned a long time ago in a brain science class that you work for 20 minutes and then you look 20 feet away for 20 seconds to give your eyes a break. So I'm trying to keep these peepers in good shape. And I spend a lot of time at the computer. Uh, so yeah, I take my circus on the road if I have to with the writing. I do all of it in the computer, very little by hand. So I don't have to worry about, oh, I left so and so at home. No, it's all right.
It's fantastic. I like the fact that you can just write anywhere because you've kind of had to out of necessity. That's great.
Yes.
Can you discuss the process of developing the relationship dynamics in International Incident with particular reference to Kara and Riddick and how you made it so that it resonated with readers? Because it really did resonate with me, and I'm sure it did with many people who read the book.
Really glad to hear that. Part of it is asking a lot of questions and really looking to myself. I've got a social work background, so I tend to look at relationships with a slightly different lens than most people do. And a lot of it is drawn on my own relationship. If you don't have communication between any relationship, it could be friendships, it could be your neighbor, you don't have communication, it's just ripe for miscommunication, and that leads to resentment. And I really dislike it when people don't go to the person that they have the problem with, that they might take to social media or they will gossip about. And that doesn't do anybody any good. So don't present a problem without a solution. And that's what I live in my own life. That's what I've taught my children, to my own detriment, because they will use my logic against me. I don't know if I should be proud or insulted sometimes, but we'll settle somewhere in the middle. Uh, the dynamics are hard to get, I think, for men, particularly Black men, because there's so much history that's there, so many expectations that are placed on them that are not placed on other people. And when I think about, like the character of Dion, who is the same age as one of my teenagers, the conversations that I have to have with my teens about, like, what happens if you are stopped by an authority figure? That threat it's always there. It colors a lot of why I wanted to have a place, an entire nation where that doesn't exist. That's not a conversation that anybody has to have. And I would honestly, I would ask friends who didn't know what I was doing. They had no idea why I was asking because I was undercover with my pen name for a long time. And I would ask my husband, does this sound like something you would say in this particular situation? And if it wasn't, I'd kind of, okay, well, why not? Not just leave it at, no, that's not what I would say. Might be like, I'd have to wait before I could talk to you because I'd be so upset or whatever it might be. So drawing on real world experience, things that I've observed, and honestly, things that I can't stand when I see in other books, like the miscommunication trope is really, it's just like if they would just spend 1 minute talking to each other, even a text would work. But then the whole story falls apart because they don't have this miscommunication to fall back on. So, yes, I'd say reacting against a lot of what I was seeing. And I know some folks that do it very well. It's just a preference on my part. And I'm hoping that lots of folks continue to say that I can see myself having this argument, uh, or being able to empathize with what's going on, or like the conflict that they're feeling internally. And like, Kara's a very honest person. She's very forthright, and yet she's perpetuating this fiction, but for a really good reason. So wanting to have that in direct opposition to who she is as a person. And how do you live with that? How do you decide what you're willing to sacrifice or blur the lines a little bit? And this chance at being herself, just being cared about. And she's not concerned about love in the beginning, just that here is somebody who doesn't want anything from me, who thinks that I have a nice smile and that I'm fun and wants to hang out with me. I'm going to protect that. And I would too if I were her. I'd probably, until the wheels fell off, I would probably uh, give that just keep on with my fiction. And my developmental editor told me, because originally I didn't have her having quite as much strife and guilt about hiding her identity. And what she said was, Kara is such an honest person. She would be feeling bad about this at some point when it starts to get serious. She's going to feel bad. So can you work that angst in? And having a good best friend, a good BFF who will tell you, I don't know that this is the right thing to do. And that's what a good BFF does. They call you on your BS. And I'm married to my BFF. We're celebrating 20 years next month.
Oh, congratulations.
So,
that's amazing.
thank you. That's so exciting. But I've got a partner that I can go to and talk to. And that's what I wish and hope that everyone has in their life, that they have at least one person who is not their person that they can talk to. That your person is, you're always on your side, although they'll call you on your BS, they want you to succeed. I would not trust a review that my husband gave me, which is why I don't let him read anything.
Yeah.
Because he would not want to say anything against my heart, even though that's a part of the process. And that's why I have a writer community that can do that. So it's very hard to go about this by yourself. And I did for a long time, and things got so much easier when I found Fictionary community, because it was connected with, just by logging on, people know what it's like, what that struggle with being a writer is like, without me having to say anything. And that's not what it is with folks who are not writers. They support you in the best non-writerly way they can. And they, without knowing it, they are guinea pigs, they are caricatures, they give ideas, all of that without the bring out. So in that way, they're supporting you with just not even knowing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you find the Fictionary community so supportive and that it's helped you find your people. That's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
I can't even imagine not having Fictionary. I'm always shilling for Fictionary. I've got a critique part. Are you in Fictionary? What's Fictionary? Well, let me tell you. And I should be getting a commission from Christina for this, but there's so much to recommend it, not just the product itself, but the community is almost as valuable as the ethics.
Yeah, and it's a very warm place. And I think people feel comfortable to share. And kindness, kindness really is our core value. And that's something Christina has driven through the whole of Fictionary. And yeah, it's just so nice to see people able to open up and share not only their work, but also some of the struggles that they have as writers as well, which we don't talk about often enough.
I agree. And that's part of why I was so unprepared for how much hard work it actually is to write a book. I didn't have any idea about that, because we've all been fed this fiction that, you sit down at the typewriter with a cigarette and a martini and you bang out a bestseller on the first try.
Yeah.
What happens? Every book you see on the shelf probably has blood, sweat, and tears and years behind getting it to that point. But nobody talks about that part. So my whole thing was, I said, I want to try and learn from other people's mistakes and benefit from the wisdom of others. And since I kept my day job, I have a very different relationship with my writing than someone who might have gave up my job at Wall Street, and now I just sunk all our family savings in here, and I don't know how we're going to eat or keep the roof over our head. No, no. Day job provides health insurance, a pension, and they will have to pry me out like a tip. I will stay there until I retire, even if I'm number one on the bestsellers list. And that's a whole other conversation about how healthcare is tied to your job in the U.S. But
yes,
I know what my level or what my threshold for being able to accept uncertainty is, and that ain't it. That was way beyond what I could do. Should have lived to write full time. I would.
yeah.
I can just imagine it, but it's not. That's not realistic right now. So
Yeah,
this is
never say
where
never though. Never say never.
That's right. This is where you invoke the power of yet versus the tyranny of now.
Yeah,
You add yet to whatever it is, and then it's still sort of a possibility. Yeah.
yeah,
And I've
exactly.
got one getting ready to go to college, and eventually the second one will be gone. I don't want to then look at my husband and be like, what do we do now? I want to have stuff ready.
Yeah, yeah, that's so important. Okay, you mentioned briefly your social work background there. So how did that background in social work and history, because you've got the history degree as well, influence the narrative and characterization in your book? If you could go into that in a bit more detail.
Certainly. So with social work, I'm always concerned about equity. Like, who are we not hearing from? Who doesn't feel safe to speak up, even if they have a seat at the table? Do they feel like their voice is going to be heard and valued and their feedback implemented? So between that and I'm always banging on this consent term. In a lot of the really popular romances right now, that you're seeing a lot of questionable consent practices, and that's not okay. Lots of folks can look at it and know this is fiction. This is not what real life is. But there are plenty that are looking at that as an idealized relationship. And when they get into it, and then like, you know what, this is actually not all that great to have somebody who has all these qualities that I like. But and I wanted that to be very clear in all of my characterizations that one, sex is something that is natural and everybody who's having sex should be having good sex. And that requires communication and thinking and talking about things like birth control. That this is not something that you should wait until the last minute when you're in the flesh that you're like, oh, by the way, what kind of birth control? No, you're going to want to get to it. You've already had this discussion.
Yeah.
So this is me sort of pushing back a little bit against that popular, I guess it's more of a trope where somebody being very overbearing and very domineering, and just maybe they're saying things like, I'm not going to use a condom at the point of, like, that's not really okay. And I don't want anyone who's impressionable to read my stuff and be like, oh, well, you know what? So, sometimes I feel like I'm shouting into the void, but I'll just keep going in my stay in my lane a little bit. But I try to do things as far as representation because it really does matter. It really does matter to see yourself or people you know reflected in the work that you put out. So I feel like I have a little bit of a responsibility to the various groups that make me different and make me who I am. Can I slide this in here to where it's not a big deal? Like, okay, yes, Kara's sister has a wife. No big deal. Just we're moving on to the next thing. Um, and I try and look at it through the lens of what am I missing? Who's not being represented? Who do I feel qualified to represent? And seeking out that information or a sensitivity reader to make sure that I'm being accurate and not being ableist or any of the other ists that are
Yeah.
around. And really taking a hard look at how could I, how can I show another that I have a breast cancer survivor. I'm 2 years out. And while I was in treatment, I was the pain in the butt that would fill out my thing. And I'd go up and say, how do you handle if somebody doesn't speak English or they don't read or they cannot speak? What do you do if somebody cannot pay the speak? And I actually got some things changed, which was
Gosh, that's so good.
where that was so validating,
Yeah.
but I'm not done yet. I'm like, I have so much more to fight for. And we need people who are in the safe position to be able to speak up, to say something, because somebody might be feeling the same way, but maybe they don't feel like they can speak up. So social work, social work everywhere. My husband will tell me you're social working me again. And I can't turn it off.
Yeah.
Like being concerned about what makes a good society functional where everybody feels valued. I try and get that into my writing. Like there can still be conflict about it, and of course there is. We're human beings. There's going to be even fictitious human beings are going to have conflict. But I tried very hard to cast a wide net, but an authentic wide net, and continue to do so.
Yeah, and I think you succeeded. It was refreshing to read a novel where, like you said, there were some tricky issues discussed, but they were just a function of the world. It wasn't like
The
a
whole
big thing
scene.
did not need to be made of it. Like, and that's more representative of what real life is like in some ways.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I think sometimes, not just in the romance genre, in many genres, things are sensationalized because it makes for conflict. But I felt like every piece of conflict that was in the book was there for a reason. You didn't just shoehorn something in because it was a thorny issue and now we've got to have all this conflict about it, which was, yeah, refreshing. And I definitely think your social work background shone through there. It was awesome.
I need to tell my master's program, be like, hey, look, it's working.
Yeah, it does work. It really does work, this stuff. That's great. Okay, so let's move on to the editing portion of the process. What challenges did you encounter while you were self-editing your book, and how did you address those?
The biggest one that caused a problem immediately was lack of knowledge. Was again, this is perpetuated that you're a lone wolf as a writer, that you don't read anybody. And I didn't know what editing really entailed and different kinds of editing. So there was that. Time was an issue. I was a busy person with home life, work life, and now, oh, why not in my spare time? I'm going to write a novel. Uh, Part of it is that balancing act, because you want to give the best of yourself to all of your endeavors, and I can't do that when I'm stressed out about maybe how work is going or whatever it might be. So I do a lot of self-care. That was so important because we need that mental space to just sort of breathe sometimes, especially here in where I live in Northern Virginia, right outside DC. It's like 1,000 miles an hour all the time. And even traffic will get your blood pressure up. And I know myself well enough to know that I would need to take some space before diving into the editing. So once I realized that I did not know enough about what the next step was, uh, said, okay, I've got to educate myself. And this is where the marvelous Joanna Penn was just, uh, I followed her author blueprint 2.0, and with the first thing saying, well, you've got to finish it. You can't edit something without having it finished. Because I was, like many people probably do, because they don't know any different, I'm editing as I'm going, which means that I never finish. So after reading Author Blueprint 2.0, I was like, okay, you have to finish it. And you don't know anything. Well, I didn't know anything about story structure, how to work on your pacing, how to include uh, all the things that are in Fictionary. I know that's another question later, and so I want to save that for that. But getting connected with people who knew more than I did and asking a lot of questions. So my social work go-to usually, it's like that Snickers commercial with the you need a moment.
Yeah.
I will always ask what makes you say that, or what makes you ask that, so that I have a moment before I stick my foot in my mouth to sort of get my thoughts together and go into people who knew more than I did. And by that point, I discovered Fictionary, which I discovered NaNoWriMo, which I heard from Joanna Penn. So that was where it's like, oh, okay, here's a tool that I can use to sort of help identify these things, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, okay, I've got this great idea. Well, I think I wrote it down. Okay, I think I'm a pretty good writer. Now what? You're expecting to hit the bestsellers list with your first time out. And that's when you find out the real work is not the writing, it's editing.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised to find that I enjoyed the editing process. And this is where Fictionary helped with that, with being able to help me think differently about some of the things I hadn't thought about, like how to include Luther, like have you incorporated senses, things that make the texture of your work so much richer. I had no idea. So I would try to take advantage of every free resource I could find out there. And the thing about free is sometimes you get what you pay for. And I was determined as an underpaid public servant that I was not going to spend money on things I figured out. So it was like, okay, I got pretty good, pretty fast with separating folks that are just in it to try and sell you their services versus genuine advice. And then finding the Fictionary community where it's there, it's available, you can ask an editor at any time. And you have a whole community that will respond to your request with, hey, I'm having trouble with so-and-so. Like I had a really hard time writing my book.
Yeah, we
And
all had a hard time with that.
I'm glad to hear it's not just me, because I struggled and struggled, and I'm not a fast writer. So I would go to like the how to write a blurb sessions, and everybody's, they're doing it as they're going. And I'm like, I'm going to need to come back to the
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't do it on the fly. I need my time and my calm environment. But once I knew what types of editing was there, then I worked through myself. And actually, I came to Fictionary. It's like it's all connected. There's 6 degrees of separation. So NaNoWriMo had a session with revising your novel, where Christina did it with Jessica Brody, and that was world changing. It was like angels singing, the heavens open, all of that, because I was like, it's a process. You have to. I'm not a plotter by nature when I'm writing, but for me, I needed to figure out how to approach self-editing. That it's not as simple as just reading through it, because you'll never finish. So taking the time to do like the level down method, where we're working on story level stuff, then scene level stuff, then page stuff, it was huge. And being able to incorporate the knowledge, and the good thing is it was recorded, because as I said, I'm not a fast writer. So sometimes I have to go back to, okay, what did they say? What was that? And you can get the analysis paralysis, where there are craft books out there for everything, and a million of them, and you get to the saturation point. Well, I got to the saturation point where it was like, I cannot take in one more lesson on how to do whatever it is. I'm going to have to suffer through this first time getting it done.
Yeah.
And it's never as hard as the first time. And you learn so much from the first time that when it goes to the time after that, you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm looking for. I'm not an expert by any means, but I feel much better and much more confident in what the process is. So Fictionary, being creative with my time and location, like I said, a good lap desk, that'll take you far. Those are the things that got me through the self-editing, and to where I felt good about my product. And it was almost one of those where you're in it, and then you finish. And you look back at how much work and effort and detail you put into this. And I was crying when I finished. I went to my husband and boo-hooing. He's like, oh, it's finished. And he could not understand why I was so upset. I was like, I'm not upset. I am thrilled because
These are
this is
happy
something
tears.
I
Yeah.
wanted since I was 14 years old. Even if, I never sell a copy of anything, finished. And that tells me something about myself, how correct. So now it's just editing is part of my built-in process where like I did the 6 weeks to edit your novel. And it was so hard for me to not go and do I was like, okay, well, I can see it. Obviously, I need to do this. And it was follow the 6 weeks. You're going to come back and revise. You're going to do that, but try it this way. So I got to the point where I was willing to step outside of what I thought I knew and try things a different way. And we have so many classes and such great instructors with Fictionary. It's great. Like, okay, that was not for me. That's okay. And you go to the next thing. And the good thing is, if I'd had to pay like for each class, then I would be feeling a very different pressure. Like I would want to make sure I can apply. Like I wouldn't want to do it if I wasn't sure I could apply what I was learning. And this way you give yourself permission to just try things. And not everything works. Like with anything, you have to find what works for you. And that's going to take some time to fine tune. And I'm sure I have more to learn with, okay, how can I do this faster? As I imagine that I will be better in my writing as I go along. And I was surprised when as I was working on the novella, which is finished for October, that much how much better I used Fictionary as I was writing.
Right.
Because I knew the process now. I'm like, okay, I can identify this a bit more easily. And it's practice. Like anything else, it's going to get better the more you do it. And just telling a new writer, you can do it, just finish. Like that's all there is to it. There's a lot of emotional care that goes into writing a book. And there's so much of you and yourself, in your effort, your beliefs that are there on that page. And I want it to be the best it can be. So I don't skip editing. Editing is not cheap.
Yes.
And as I said before, I'm an underpaid public servant. So I got creative and I got a second job to be able to afford good editing because I don't want my product to be out there and people are saying, well, it was okay, except for all these typos or whatever it might be. If there's going to be any nitpicking, I would want it to be about something more substantive than, well, she can use the ellipse right.
Yeah, exactly that. Okay, so let's get into Fictionary itself. So what features of the Fictionary software did you find most beneficial or useful during the editing process?
The first one would be the story arc. That helped me so much with pacing, which was something I did not understand when I was writing the first novel, first draft will never see the light of day. Because I would look at it and be like, but it was awful because I didn't know. And doing the plot elements are the ones that help me the most. Like, do you have an entry hook? Do you have an exit hook? What's happening in the middle? And you're seeing climax so that things are done intentionally instead of, well, I guess it was okay. But if you take the time to look at it and be like, okay, do I really have all of these elements or most of these elements, or did I just sort of throw it against the wall and see what's stuck? So being able to examine each scene individually was huge. And being able to move whole scenes around, because at first I started off, I was in Word, and I don't know enough about Word to know can I do chapters and move? I don't know, but I know that I can do it in Fictionary, and it makes my life so much easier. That and the undo button, because you'll try things, you'll be like, that doesn't really work there, but that's okay because you can just move it. And what else did I say? Uh, I said story arc even by itself is helpful, and I love how all of the elements, the 38 elements, they've got an information thing right there. If you're not sure what maybe the scene climax is or the internal POV goal, you can just click on that and get information. You can find a video that, or just something that will help you remember, oh, that's right. Okay, this is what I'm doing with this. So it gives more of a cohesive picture of the whole thing. So you can drill down to is your character on a good arc? Are you telling a complete story? And these are things that are easier to see when you have those elements there. That you might have done great with 50 of the scenes, with maybe including the stuff, but then you've got a few that, oh, I found out with Fictionary, there are vanity things that you have for yourself where you're like, this is so cute. It's so cute. It should be in there, but it doesn't serve the purpose. And you've got to be ruthless. And then you make like your director's cut. You put it in a file. I have my brilliant ideas for another day.
Yeah.
Nothing ever goes away to die in writing. You just put it someplace else. But being able to use those elements for it to be a test with the thing that I think is so wonderful and so cute and so thoughtful, but it doesn't move forward. It doesn't really have a good reason to be there. So okay, say goodbye, put it in the file, I use it T-Rex. But that's hard to do when you don't have tools that you can use to pinpoint, okay, what is it about this that's missing something? Do I want to see, can I put blah, blah, blah in there and make it worth its space there? Or would it be better served by taking it out?
Yeah, exactly. And so how did using Fictionary, if it did, alter your writing process and enhance your final manuscript as well?
Oh, it was unrecognizable for Fictionary. It was a draft. It was a draft that wasn't cohesive. So it altered to where I keep these questions in the back of my mind as I'm writing. Depends on what phase I'm at. Like with the writing, I struggle with trying to edit at the same time. So I'll tell myself, no, you're going to get to that, get the idea out on the page, and then you'll work. Being able to know that that's there, that Fictionary will help my writing be very stronger and clearer, and that it's a great tool. It's one of the, like, it's not writing it for you, it's helping you write a better version of your brilliant idea. So I will not write anything without Fictionary anymore. I'm so glad I discovered it early in my writing career so that I don't go, 10 books in and be like, oh man, I gotta go back and do those other 10 books. But Lucy is telling me I need to get to 57 books that I need to have out.
Yeah.
And so I will get there. And I'll get there with help from Fictionary and the community as well. So I can't even imagine doing what I do without Fictionary.
Oh, I'm so glad it's helped you in that way, and Christina will be thrilled as well. It's funny that you mentioned the 6 degrees of separation thing earlier, because the first thing, much like you, the first author I stumbled across was Joanna Penn, really, who was teaching the self-publishing stuff. And I read Author Blueprint 2.0 or whatever it was called at the time. And yeah, it was a complete game changer. And then that led me to Sasha Black, who spoke at our Fictionary conference in Feb. And she basically told me to take the certification course, Fictionary editor certification. And if she hadn't done that, I would not be the storyteller that I am today. So I'm with you on the 6 degrees of separation.
Yes. And I think I'm probably a few years down the road, I'll probably want to do the certification course, because I know how helpful it was for me to have those supportive people in my life as I was doing this. And it was like, this is something, a skill that you can cultivate and you can use for other folks. There are, who knows how many writers out there, folks that think they can't do it. And that's because they don't have the language. Not that they can't do it, they can. They need some support. So maybe a little bit further down the line, when I'm not an underpaid publisher, I can do this.
Yeah.
I've got a countdown clock for how many years.
Well, hopefully so. And you're very busy as it is. We don't need to add anything more to your plate right now.
Not right now.
Okay, so what guidance then would you offer to other authors who are considering self-editing their works? And what role would Fictionary play in that advice to other authors as well?
Get connected with a community of like-minded people. There are lots of communities out there, but you're looking for a good fit. And Fictionary, the community, is that you have your subgenres within there, and then you also have just sort of your general message board where you can interact with folks as much or as little as you like. And the advice that I would give is stay connected with a writer community that supports and affirms you. If you've got somebody who's not, in my case, I felt like all of my editors were Team Nikki all the way for the win. If you don't feel like that's what you're getting from the people that are working with you to supposedly help your product become better, that's not for you. It's not a good fit. Don't throw any time, money, or energy at that. Take your time to find the best fit. And use the Fictionary products. You've got a free trial for you to go into it. Oh, I knew like the first day of the free trial, I was like, oh yeah, I'm buying this. That's awesome. Use what's there. We have a vast library. You've got wonderful editors and story coaches who are there to support you and cheer you on. And the kindness that's in the community, that's not everywhere. That is, like, I find myself in other groups that I belong to. Let me just go to Fictionary because it's a pool, or it's a pit in some areas of the interwebs. And there's a lot of negativity, and it's not encouraging. That's not good for you. It's not good for you emotionally or in your authorly pursuits. So let's say, come on over. The water's fine over here in Fictionary community, and the more the merrier.
Yeah, I totally agree. Nikki's book, International Incident, is out on November 4th, 2023. And I highly recommend when it comes out, you go and pick up a copy because it's fantastic. And thank you so much for coming to speak to us, Nikki. That was great.
Thank you, Sheen. Had a great time.